Hey Cult Vault listeners, my name is Eric Skwarczynski and I'm the host of the Preacher Boys podcast. On my show, I interview survivors of mental, physical, and sexual abuse within the independent fundamental Baptist cult. I also interview a host of authors, cult experts, therapists, trauma specialists, and a ton of other incredible guests to talk about common red flags when it comes to abusive, cultish environments, and to talk about how you can survive and thrive after leaving a cult. In my latest episode, I sat down with Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames, stars of HBO's docuseries The Vow, and you can check out that episode right now over on the Preacher Boys podcast. Just head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you consume podcast content, and just search for the Preacher Boys podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in, and now enjoy the Cult Vault.
From New York Times bestselling author Paula McLain comes a propulsive new mystery of intertwined destinies and heart-wrenching suspense. A detective hiding away from the world, a series of disappearances that reach into her past. Can solving them help her heal? When the Stars Go Dark tells a story of fate, redemption, and what it takes to reclaim our lives. When the Stars Go Dark by Paula McLain. Available wherever books and audiobooks are sold.
Hello listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of The Cult Vault. This is a topic that we have covered quite a bit by this time, but there was such a request to interview this particular person that I've decided to give one final interview, at least for the time being, to this subject, which is the Soka Gakkai International. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention a new podcast that was recently released by a former cult member of a polygamist Mormon sect. The name of the podcast is The Nice Cult, and it is available on all platforms today. If you would like to listen to something new from the perspective of someone who grew up in a highly controlling movement and interview other people, much like we do on this show, then The Nice Cult could be for you. Also, I must apologise for some technical issues within this episode. It appears that sometimes when I respond or talk with Blanche, my voice seems to echo over some of the things that I am saying or she is saying, so I really do apologise for the audio quality of this episode. Anyway, enough of business. By popular demand, here is Blanche. Hello, Blanche, and welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm really excited. I'm excited because I have covered this topic a number of times, and I had actually decided that that's where I was going to leave it. However, I had a handful of people reach out to me and personally ask me if I would interview yourself. And I thought, well, this is interesting because I've never had this many people say, please, can you speak to this one person? So, of course, I had to get in touch and see if you would. And you've said yes. So here you are. And we are going to talk again about SGI today.
Great. Well, I'm certainly honored to have the opportunity.
And I mean, the two people I've spoken to previously about this movement have both been men. So I am excited to get your perspective on this as well. And hopefully throughout the episode, the listeners will get a gist of just how informed you are about this entire movement as a whole. So would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Ooh, not really. I'm actually kind of a ghost or a phantom. When I started doing this anti-cult activism, there was really no focus to it. I was in the SGI from 1987 until 2007. So just a few weeks over 20 years. And when I got out, I didn't have anybody I could talk to. And I ran into my first ex-SGI forum that I found, which was the old Rick Ross forum, about 2012. And then 2013, the forum was purchased and it went down and everybody scattered. And I ran into two other people that I knew from there on Reddit. And, once we realized we knew each other, we basically picked up where we'd left off, and we were posting about our observations and our experiences in SGI. And there were some SGI members on Reddit who just hounded us and harassed us. They'd get our IDs shadow banned or deleted, have our posts deleted, and just follow us around, lambasting and insulting us and making it really impossible to have a conversation. So at one point, the worst one said, "Nobody wants you here. Why don't you go make your own site?" And we were like, wow, yeah, that's actually a really great idea. So one of us set up the Sgi Whistleblowers Site on Reddit, and we were the 3 founding mods. Well, one guy who'd been in for over 30 years, he dropped out to do other things about 2015, I think. And then the other founding mod, she was active on Facebook and stuff. And she really got into politics in the run-up to the 2016 election. And so she kind of checked out, and she passed away almost 2 years ago, which is very sad. But that left it all to me. So I am Blanche Fromage, white cheese, because cheese is funny. And Blanche was my childhood fake name. Like if we were having a family portrait done and the photographer would say, "What's your name, little girl?" I'd just say Blanche, because he had no right. He didn't need to know my name. I was just a kid. So anyway, I guess I've always been a little antisocial. We've been doing this site, and one of the reasons I don't want to make it about me, even though I'm the only one left who was the original founder, and I'm important because I know how to find things. Reddit only shows the most recent, 975 posts, and our site has probably approaching 4,000 by now. So I've been doing a lot of archiving and indexing so that hopefully other people will be able to find things on there. And so if someone comes with a concern or a question, I know how to find the old information because, I've been here the whole time. So that gives me an advantage. But that said, this was never designed to be my site. We think of ourselves as the consumer reports on SGI, because SGI will tell you all about how wonderful it is and how much you need it. But, they don't tell you that 95 to 99% of everyone who tries it ends up leaving, and you don't get to hear those people because they're not invited to speak at their meetings or activities. So our site is where people can get the other side of the story. And just like there's no Mr. Yelp in charge of Yelp reviews, I'm just an administrator behind the scenes, and hopefully really trying to create an environment where people can speak freely and feel safe and have fun. We don't allow a lot of proselytizing, recommending other religions, just because that's not fair. When somebody gets out of a cult, it's too easy to just jump right into another. So we really encourage people to just step back, take a little while, get back in touch with yourself, what you like to do, that sort of thing. I'm all over the site, of course, but I never wanted it to be about me.
Yeah, when you go on the subreddit, you can see, if somebody comes and asks a question, a lot of the users of the subreddit will tag you in the posts, and you'll respond with very, very lengthy, informative posts, usually 1 or 2 posts with different resources or links or different pieces of information. So it's easy to see that that you are the parent figure of the subreddit, and everybody's obviously got a lot of respect for you on that sub. It was 4 or 5 people from that subreddit that messaged me and asked, "Oh, please, can you speak to Blanche?" And we'd really love to hear from Blanche. So it's interesting what you said about there being SGI members who would hound you before you set up your subreddit, because I have noticed that occasionally 1 or 2 practicing members will drop into the subreddit itself to even today.
Yeah, we get oh gosh, what to call them. It varies between SGI trolls and SGI crusaders. The trolls come in to insult us and malign us and tell us that we're wrong and we're liars and we're mentally ill and we need professional help and that we're demon possessed. And they like to call us, there's this word, it's a foreign word, it's pronounced ichantika. And what it means is a person of incorrigible disbelief. Cool, that fits. But the thing is, in the Lotus Sutra and in the Nichiren canon, ichantikas are considered a class of people, then there's no penalty if you kill them. You get no accrued bad karma. It's a freebie. You can kill these people whenever you want and not suffer any ill effects from it. Unless, of course, the police catch you, which is kind of downside. They don't understand your religion. But, so there is this threatening subtext. So those are the SGI trolls. Now, the SGI crusaders are the ones who want to come in and set us straight about how wonderful the SGI is. Oh, it's so warm. It's so family-like. They love to say that. And how glorious their dear leader, the guru, Daisaku Ikeda, is. Yeah, he's been missing in action since early May 2010. But everybody's expected to want to take him as their own personal mentor in life and accept him into their heart and think, oh, what would Daisaku Ikeda do? And, all this stuff, all the materials that they study come with his name liberally peppered throughout and quoting from him. Books with his name on them. They're all ghost written, of course. Articles supposedly written by him. All of this stuff. It's all completely focused on Daisaku Ikeda. And that is, of course, one of the things that we point out. This is totally a cult of personality, people. The ones who've been around on the site long enough to know my style, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is so Blanche. She goes on forever.
Yeah, that's similar to what Mark said in my previous interview when I spoke to him about SGI. He mentioned that it's a cult of personality and that it's all focused on one person, whereas peaceful movements and practices shouldn't be about one person. They should be about like a culture as a whole. So it's interesting to have somebody else use the term cult of personality. So you mentioned that you got involved.
Yeah, he made I think was he the one who said that legitimate religions are all about texts and traditions and rituals and practices, whereas the cults are the ones that have this obsessive focus on a single person. Mm-hmm. And whoever it was that said that, that really spoke to me because, yeah, that's it. When it becomes all about this person, then you have gone flying off the rails.
I mean, it's sometimes even in things like Catholicism and Christianity, people can often do things or say things. The same with the Jehovah's Witnesses as well. And they can use the name Jesus Christ, Jehovah to almost justify their actions if they are of negative consequence towards somebody else, to whip a child in the name of Christ, which we've heard somebody attest to talk about their personal experiences on this podcast previously. They would be paddled in the name of Jesus Christ. So sometimes if there is a godhead or figurehead or even, people like Jim Jones and Charles Manson, if there's a charismatic leader, it's almost like that figure is used to justify acts against other humans, which obviously is wrong. So I'm not here to say that every single movement that has one person at its core is going to be evil or a cult, but it is interesting how many of those movements you can look at and apply cult-like methods of control that are in operation in those movements. So I think it's important to point that out, especially because I received an email from somebody the other day who I believe is still a practicing member of SGI. And they reached out to say to me that everything that's been spoken about in my interviews with James and Mark is completely inaccurate and is absolutely nothing like the experience that they have had with SGI. And I responded to explain to them that if they've had a positive experience, then that's wonderful. If they've managed to have the experiences that SGI on paper says that they are all about, then that's not a bad thing. I'm not here to say that Christianity as a whole is a cult, but there are certainly branches and denominations of Christianity that, again, fit inside those cult-like control frames that, you know, that we've looked at. Stephen Hassan's bite model, for example. There are a lot of branches and denominations of different religions across the world that you can look at, and you can pinpoint exactly what parts of these criteria they're using. So obviously, as you said, you know, 95 to 99% of people that go to SGI and try SGI end up leaving. So I'm not saying maybe it's that 1%, maybe it's more, that are having these positive experiences. So I don't want to label
if I could,
all of these groups
if I could interrupt you for
of course,
for just one moment. This is a dynamic that we have studied at quite some length ourselves, that you have the inner and outer circles of membership.
Right.
The people who are in the outer circle, for them, it's kind of like a social club, and they think it's interesting and it's fun, and they go to the occasional activities and all that. And so they have a very different experience from the people who move into the inner circle, the ones who get into leadership, right? Rise through the leadership ranks. They're suddenly seeing a lot more and a lot more unsettling things. However, because SGI uses an appointment system, never elections, people who are judged to have the proper degree of faith in the right way, they're the ones who get promoted. And so they are, I think one aspect of it is they're sufficiently devout that they can see these things and not go screaming for the exits.
Right.
So, you know, you have that dynamic. Also, that person that you mentioned is kind of like the positive reviews on Yelp. You know, you go read these, and we all know that a lot of companies have their own staff go and, you know, seed these with positive reviews. Oh, this is the best thing ever. Just what I wanted. It's even better than it's advertised to be. So, you know, if I need information on a product, I will go to Yelp, but I'll look for the negative reviews, because the positive reviews aren't going to affect me. The negative reviews, though, may affect me seriously. So those are the ones I want to know about. Yeah. And until sites like ours and like Mark's, there wasn't really a place where you could go to get these kinds of reviews. You know, I mean, people leaving comments on their own little blogs, you know, out lost in the wilderness of the internet, hard to find, really hard to find. And so we've done what we can to make sure Sgi Whistleblowers has a high enough visibility that it comes up when people do searches. It's there. People can find us. And that's been one of the really exciting parts about, you know, doing this anti-cult activism. You know, people will ask me, you know, why can't you just get over it and move on? Oh, a cult would sure like that, wouldn't they? You know, because I'm a terrible gadfly. And I have virtually unlimited resources to, you know, to do this kind of work. It's important work, and I just like it. It's really fun. You know, who's to tell someone that they can't have this hobby that they like, and who's to be able to tell who's going to like a certain kind of hobby? It's not the sort, just like with a religion, it's not a matter of people arguing you into it or convincing you should want this hobby. It's more something that you just like. So I do this, I enjoy it. And it, from the messages I've got, it has helped a lot of people over the years. And that's very satisfying and gratifying.
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight the email I received from this this person. I just wanted to basically reiterate what I replied to him in the email, and I think it's also important to highlight that there are probably mountains more resources available for people looking to join SGI and be a member of that community than there are, like you mentioned, sites like the one that you run and the one that Mark runs.
Oh yeah.
So and this podcast as well is going to be, you know, I could speak to members of the troubled teen industry every day of the week, you know, who have had negative experiences.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That's not to say that every single person that attended those programs had a negative experience. It's just my podcast and my platform is here to focus on those voices. So, you know, I don't want to upset people who don't identify SGI as a cult, but at the same time, there are obviously a number of people, like the people in the subreddit, who probably do identify with it that way. So this is just a small platform to offer those people a voice. And I'm sure that there are many other platforms available for people who don't see SGI in a negative light, where they can go and have their discussions and their conversations and discuss
Sure, and we appreciate your work.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, any any platform that gives somebody you know, a voice who might otherwise not have one. I think it's good work. So I just wanted to get that out the way. I'm sure that person will listen to this episode, so I hope you can appreciate that we've had that part of the discussion. So for people that might not have listened to the first 2 episodes that we did on this, would you summarize for us the beliefs and practices of SGI?
Sure, I'll try to put it in a nutshell. SGI stands for Soka Gakkai International. It's the international colonial branch of the mothership Soka Gakkai in Japan. That was started in the late 1930s as an educators association, but after the war, one person who survived, you know, both the war and he was imprisoned, and he decided to restart it as Soka Gakkai. The original one was the Value Creating Educational Association. Soka Gakkai means Value Creating Association. And at that point, they were one of the lay organizations of a traditional Nichiren temple in Japan, Nichiren Shoshu. Sho means Orthodox. So it was the Orthodox sect of school of Nichiren.
Right.
When up until the second president, President Toda, died in 1958, the movement was pretty much restricted to mostly in Japan. Some of the Japanese war brides left over from the American occupation, they moved back home to the US with their husbands, and they continued practicing over here. But it was still kind of, you know, disorganized, so to speak. It was just them being basically independence in the new world kind of thing. Now, what you mentioned about, people justifying horrible things in the name of their beliefs, you know, the whole might makes right. We saw that during the early years of the Soka Gakkai as well. For example, the police hauled Toda in and made him sign a statement that his followers would stop using force and violence and high pressure tactics to try and convince people to join the group. Also, when they first started getting into politics, there was a lot of election fraud. And one person said, well, you know, to make what we wanted happen, we just had to break the laws, but we can't have been doing anything wrong because everything we did was for the good of our Gakkai. You know, Soka Gakkai, our organization. And so, yeah, that's been kind of a problem over there. But when Daisaku Ikeda finally managed to bribe, barter, and negotiate his way into the presidency to succeed Toda after Toda's death from cirrhosis of the liver, because he was a heavy drinker. That's one reason they kind of praise attachments. Classic Buddhism says attachments are bad because they cause suffering. And so it prescribes a series of exercises, ways of thinking, lessons, if you will, to help people rid themselves of attachments so they will suffer less. SGI goes completely the opposite. Our attachments make us powerful and strong. Yeah, until you die of cirrhosis of the liver. But anyway, so it took Ikeda just over 2 years to solidify his claim to the presidency. He was having to go against 3 major factions. The Makaguchi group, who were followers of that original first guy who started the Educators Association, the Toda faction, who had, really thought he was the bomb, and the younger members that he himself had had more contact with. And once he seized that position, one of the first things he did was head out on a world tour. Of course, traveling first class, imperial style, nothing but the best for Ikeda Sensei. And his first 2 stops were Brazil and the US, because both of those countries had the largest populations of Japanese expats. Of course, a Japanese religion for Japanese people is going to be easiest to sell to Japanese people, right? And to this day, those 2 countries still have the highest populations, except, maybe over there in the Asian world, they've got some too. But anyhow, in the West, it's the US and Brazil. And so Ikeda established organizational structures in those countries because he does whatever and everybody goes along with it because his word is law. And after that, things started growing in the US. Now, one of Ikeda's smartest moves, and he hasn't had a whole lot of these, was to send over this Japanese Korean man named Masayasu Sadanaga to head up and run the US organization. Sadanaga got a PhD in political science, which is a very interesting choice. So he could have called himself doctor, but he never did. Meanwhile, Ikeda, who has purchased degrees because he dropped out of college in his first semester of night classes at the community college, he has people rushing around the world buying up honorary degrees for him. I think he's got over 300. And those, because they aren't earned, you're not supposed to call yourself doctor, but he does. Anyhow, more of him being a big fat phony. So Sadanaga eventually changed his name to George Williams. And he led the organization for decades. He was still the leader when I joined in 1987. And in those days and earlier, boy, was there a go-go rhythm. Every night there would be activities, and activities would go from like 7 o'clock to give you time to get out of work, get home, change your clothes, grab a quick bite to eat, and get to where you were supposed to be. And they'd often go till after midnight. And people were going out on the streets doing street shakabuku, knocking on strangers' doors. Excuse me, have you heard about Namyo Renkikyo? Just total cringe, complete cringe. And yes, I did that because, such is the power of the social milieu you're in. Because everybody else is doing it, you can end up doing things that you never in a million years would have envisioned yourself doing. I joined because my boyfriend pressured me to. And that's a whole another long story that we don't care about because it's stupid. But I ended up getting enculted. I ended up getting into it and very quickly started rising through the ranks, the leadership ranks. And that, that's real heady stuff. They start off with the love bombing, the Moonies weaponized, giving people, the new people will feel like, everybody around them has never met someone so fascinating and insightful and brilliant. And, oh, we just love you so much. It's like, the best friends that you'd always dreamed of, but never managed to make in real life. Here they are. And you start going along with them. So this was how it was when I joined. And that kind of rhythm tends to be very isolating because you don't have time to just hang out with family members or friends because you've got important work to do. Back then, we were all convinced that our religion was going to take over the world within 20 years. So we could work super hard, super intensively, super focused now because, we've got just 20 years to go, as one of their songs said. We truly believed that we would be the ruling class within 20 years. Now, here we are, and we're more than 40 years on from when I joined. Nothing's happening. Or was it 30? Yeah, it was about 30. Oh, who knows? Whatever. So they have a very distinctive practice, which is chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, which is the title of the Lotus Sutra. They tell people they don't need to read the Lotus Sutra. If you chant the title, you're basically reciting the entirety of the sutra with each Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Think how well that would work for a college student. Oh, I'm just going to recite the title of my textbook and then I will have all that knowledge by magic. So Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is considered as a magic chant. That's very wrong of them to say. They'll say, no, it's mystic. But really, what's the difference? They can't explain how it works. Oh, but it really works. You chant for stuff and you get it. And that's been one of the SGI's clever manipulations is they will tell people, just try it for 90 days, see what happens. And meanwhile, they're kind of surrounded by these people who are pointing out to them that every good thing that happens during that time period, well, that's because you chanted. That's because you chanted. And, good things and bad things and neutral things happen all the time throughout your life. But when you have this group of super supportive people who are, treating you really well, and they're encouraging you to think of the good things as being the result of this new thing you tried, well, then it's kind of like finding what you looked for in the last place you looked, right? Everybody does that. Try to find it in the first place, but more on bleh. So along with that, you're chanting and you also do a recitation of the sutra. They drastically chopped that down in the early 2000s. So now it hardly takes any time at all, but you're expected to chant kind of a lot, especially if there's something you want. Now, it makes logical sense that if you want something and you're chanting to get it, you're already doing everything you can think of to get that thing in your regular life, right? But because you believe that this is out of your reach, you need this crutch, this magic chant to magically make the universe give it to you. So it ends up being a little bit crippling, sometimes a lot bit crippling, and it is isolating too. They chant the magic chant to a magic scroll. This is a mass-produced Xerox copy of some old Nichiren Shoshu, long dead Nichiren Shoshu high priest's calligraphy. A bunch of squiggles on a page. And that supposedly has the power to enable your chanting to get the most magnificent results, whatever. Now, this is kind of funny to me because there was this horrible schism, never know how to pronounce that, back in late 1990, where the priesthood finally had enough of Ikeda and his megalomaniacal ways, and they kicked him out. And they cut off the Soka Gakkai and SGI. They wouldn't excommunicate the membership for another 6 or 7 years because, what they wanted was, see, when I joined, we were both SGI and Nichiren Shoshu. Those were inseparable at that point. But now that they'd separated, Nichiren Shoshu wanted the members who wished to continue practicing with the temple to switch their membership to the temple and do that, separate themselves from SGI because now, we're getting divorced, we're separating all our stuff, and it's time to choose. So, long story there. But that Nichiren Shoshu was the basis for all the SGI's doctrines and tenets and history and everything, So SGI really is still kind of like Nichiren Shoshu in drag or something, because it's very similar, except when they separated, this created a huge problem because they could no longer point to Nichiren Shoshu's doctrines and stuff, as their religion, and they would be cut off and lose their tax-exempt status and the wall that separates church from state. They would be audited. Oh my gosh, that's like the worst fear in the world for SGI. So they quick scrambled to find some new doctrines to make their own Nichiren-style religion. And the main one they focused on was master and disciple, because of course Ikeda's the master, right? But that word master doesn't really sell very well in this country with our, history of slavery and masters and slaves and all that. So they tried teacher and student. That was kind of cool. And teacher and disciple, still kind of lukewarm. So they finally settled on mentor and disciple. And that's basically the core of the SGI doctrines now, mentor and disciple, even though mentors don't have disciples, but whatever. They're all expected to take Daisaku Ikeda, this very old Japanese billionaire who appears to be lost in the, trackless wastes of dementia now from the few pictures that have been released since he went under wraps back in 2010. But they're all supposed to accept him as their mentor in life. And they're all supposed to pattern their lives after his alter ego in the ghost-written book series, The Human Revolution and The New Human Revolution, which is a novelization with a whole bunch of stuff made up and, outright added to create the history that Ikeda wishes he had within the movement, even though none of this actually happened. The earliest editions said in the foreword, supposedly by him, sometimes we must falsify facts to project the truth. Well, then it's not the truth. He's using weird definitions. This is part of SGI's private language. So when you're talking to somebody who has this religious private language going on, you kind of don't understand a lot of what they're saying because it doesn't make sense, And he also said in this forward that certain events were added, added to kind of make a point or clarify something. So they made up scenarios and just wove them in there to project the truth, I guess, whatever. So the SGI members are supposed to want to become Shinichi Yamamoto, which is the name of his character in this novel series. And they're supposed to want to learn as much as they can about Ikeda and his vision and make his vision their own. So that's going to be their focus in life, whatever Ikeda thinks is important or wants to see happen or wants to do. They're supposed to want to embrace this, internalize this, and become his arms and legs, his voice, to do the things that he would have done if he could have. Yet, when they're recruited, they're told that this is about the individual becoming their best self and doing human revolution to, become the person they've always wanted to be. They only learn about, the switcheroo where they're supposed to become Ikeda's clones. They don't learn about that up front. Oh, no. That's much later down the road and introduced very slowly and in a roundabout manner. So they don't see it coming. Because if somebody asked them, would you like to join this group? We worship an elderly Japanese billionaire that nobody's seen in over 10 years. Who would join? Who? Nobody. So what they do is every morning and evening, they're supposed to do this truncated recitation of a portion of the sutra and chant morning and evening, every single day. And they're supposed to go to a district discussion meeting once a month. And there will be a planning meeting for the discussion meeting that will be held before the discussion meeting. there will also be a study meeting held separately. Once a month on a Sunday morning, they're all expected to get together at their center, if they have one, or whoever has the biggest house, if they don't have a local center, and have what they call their World Peace Prayer Meeting, or Kozan Rufu Gongyo, where they'll all get together and have a big meeting. And so there are all these meetings going on. In addition, if you're a leader, you have leaders meetings of various types. So along with that, there's supposed to be home visits happening where leaders go see the members in their homes to, talk to them. And if you have a problem, you're told, well, you should go get guidance from one of your senior leaders. And that turns into another meeting. You can be busy with SGI pretty much every single day of the week if you want to be. But a lot of the people in the outer circle, they'll just go to the district discussion meeting, maybe the Kozan Rufu Gongyo meeting, and then they'll maybe get together and chant with other members of their district during the week, things like that. And they think that's fine, Mm-hmm. So this Kozan Rufu I mentioned, that means to widely declare and spread, but it used to be considered to be an end game, that this was the point when all the people in the world would be converted and things would magically change. The weather would settle down and become wonderful, bumper harvests, nobody'd be hungry anymore. Everybody'd be peaceful and no more wars, no more political conflicts. And this would all magically happen, described as the time of Kozan Rufu. So when hateful, intolerant Nichiren's intolerant chant was embraced by most people in the world, Ikeda dialed it down to a third because there ain't no way they were going to get all of them, not even in Japan. All these magical things would then start happening and everybody would be so glad. So even if we forced them to join, once they saw how great it was, and the world settled down and became completely peaceful, they'd be glad. So once again, might makes right and the ends justify the means. So Kozan Rufu is used as a term meaning world peace. And when I joined, that was what was going to happen within 20 years. But now they've had to change the definition because they're tanking on their membership. So it's been decided that this is just something that's going to be an eternal process going forward into the endless future. Mm-hmm. And once again, that's a lot less appealing to people too. This whole, you're going to be part of this movement that's going to take over the world in 20 years. That's kind of exciting, especially for certain kinds of people who seek dominance and control and power. This whole namby-pamby, no, we're just going to keep going to meetings once a month, twice a month, forever, while nothing really happens. So with the excommunication, they really ran out of gas.
Yeah, brilliant. My microphone is like, if I respond to something you're saying whilst you're talking, it's like echoing over what you're saying. So I've just been sitting here nodding along. If the listeners are wondering why I'm being so quiet, I am listening and nodding along to the things that Blanche is saying. But I just didn't want to cut you off by sort of commenting on anything. But there were a few things that you said that I would like to go back on quickly. So the chanting for 90 days, when you join SGI and they say, just try this, just chant for 90 days. You made an interesting comment in some of our correspondence that it takes around about that time to form an addiction.
Or to get a habit ingrained in your life so that you will continue it.
Mm-hmm. Habit or addiction, yeah.
Yeah, nobody tells anybody that. It's that they're basically saying, here, just try this meth every day for 90 days. And at the end, if you don't like it, well, you can quit, no problem. It's everybody knows how difficult it is to break a habit, no matter what the habit is, mm-hmm. Because habits take up residence in our brains. And the neat thing about a habit, which is one reason why, is that people like them. They make people feel good. Whether you're stacking coins from your pockets on the dresser at the end of the workday, or chanting this thing, or doing a certain exercise routine, that gives your brain a little endorphin boost that makes you feel calmer. It makes you feel more content. Mm-hmm. And it also makes you, in the case of like chanting, it disables your critical thinking and puts you into a trance state. And while you're in that state, you're a lot more receptive to whatever anybody is going to say to you. And that's why they start all their meetings with chanting, to get everybody in that into that trance state, so they will just go along and be happy and all of this stuff. It's really kind of weird and creepy once you get away from it, when you recall the things you observed and, hear what other people are telling about the same things, people who maybe woke up a little sooner than you did. It's like, oh yeah, that really was going on, wasn't it? But there, all of the intolerant religions have a very strong fear component. And, they'll talk about how you'll go to hell if you do this or that. And in the SGI, it's the hell of incessant suffering. Oh, horrible. And that, of course, everybody's chanting to get benefits. They chant for what they want, and they want the benefits. So then the question arises, why didn't I get my benefit? I did everything you said. Oh, well, if you're having doubts, if you're thinking negative thoughts, those can separate you from the result you want. And complaining, wow, that just slashes fortune and makes it even harder for you to get your benefits. So they're also taught that they're 100% responsible for everything that happens to them, that they chose their circumstances in a past lifetime in order to show actual proof in this lifetime. That's how they describe karma. So everything that's happening to you is essentially your fault because you chose it. So quit your whining. You chose this. And who do you think is going to feel sorry for you? You got yourself into this. Chant to get yourself out. It doesn't matter that there are usually other people involved and that these other people have agency and independence and they can do whatever they want. Mm-hmm. The SGI member is supposed to chant to transform all their circumstances. And one of their more dangerous teachings is they also tell people not to leave bad situations until they have resolved everything and turned it into an ideal, wonderful, happy situation. They have traditionally told that to women in abusive marriages, to people who are in terrible job situations. No, if you leave, you're just going to get the same thing all over again, and it'll take you that much longer to get to the bottom of this. Stay where you are and chant. So it ends up being crippling, in terms of managing your life.
That sounds absolutely horrendous. That sounds like they're basic, like if you grew up and you were subjected to child abuse or horrible things that people have spoken about on this podcast before, things like molestation and violent physical abuse, or even something like being placed in the foster system at an early age, and then to be told as an adult, oh yeah, that's your fault, you caused those things to happen to yourself.
Yes,
that's like the complete opposite of what a therapist would say. And I can't even imagine how damaging or how upsetting that would be for me to go to somebody and tell them something that damaged me when I was a child, to be told that that's my fault by somebody that you like look up to and who is supposed to be helping you move, and be part of this peaceful practice. That would be absolutely heartbreaking. And then to stay in abusive situations, or situations that are bad for your mental health, or situations that are bad for your well-being, is almost like setting you up to never leave SGI no matter what experience you have. Like, no, it's like,
you nailed it.
You want to stay in this job, it's bad for you, but you have to stay till you work it out, or you want to stay in this abusive relationship until you work it out. And now you're moving into the inner circles of SGI, and you're finding things out that those on the outer circle don't really know about, but you should hang around because you should never leave a negative situation. That's mind-boggling.
Oh, they tell everybody who has a problem with the organization, oh, you have such brilliant ideas. You're so advanced and you see things so clearly. You're so insightful. We need people like you. Make the SGI better. You can only do this if you're here working from the inside with us. Be the change you want to see in the SGI. But SGI is a broken system. It's operating exactly the way its Japanese masters have set it up to operate, and it is not going to change. No member has any authority or agency to make changes. Everything is dictated from Japan, from the schedule to the content of the meeting. We now started putting out PowerPoint slides, and the whole meeting is supposed to be, you read what's on the slide. And they even give them the discussion questions that they're supposed to talk about. They aren't allowed to decide their own discussion questions or, start from wherever they want. And of course, some claim that their district does, but others have pointed out that, when they did this, senior leaders came by to tell them they were out of rhythm and to lock things down. You have to be in lockstep. Unity is the most important virtue, which of course translates into conformity and obedience, because that's what they want.
And it encourages that chance, like, stay a little bit more as well. I guess when you have a room full of people chanting in unison.
Very much. They do tell you that no one who has left the organization has ever become happy. The only way to have true happiness is to be within the SGI, that other people, and the second president, Toda, liked to say this, other people, they may, in their benightedness, they may think they're happy, but they just don't really understand what happiness is. They've never experienced the genuine happiness that we in the Soka Gakkai are able to have. We have this rare, happy, rare form of happiness that's so much better than anything those poor little people can think of. They think they're happy, but aren't they pathetic? They're so adorable. That sort of thing. It's very, all these intolerant cults like SGI set up their members as being superior to everyone else. Therefore, they must help everyone else to become more like them. And they're doing everyone such a huge favor, but really, you're right. It is the opposite of therapy. And that is one of the reasons that we at Sgi Whistleblowers feel it is so important to have our board as a resource that people can come to. Sometimes people will describe something that happened to them, like when their leader insulted them or something, and they talk about it just with such detachment. And in those cases, I'll turn on the all bold caps and say, that's monstrous, that's horrible, that's abuse. Because when people get so accustomed to an abusive environment, they think of it as normal. This is just how life works. This is completely natural. Everybody's parents hit them. It's just nothing. No, it's wrong. It's horrible. This is so destructive to you and damaging to you. And gosh, let's not even start on how disrespectful it is. This group that says, we value everyone equally and we truly respect the human being. Oh my gosh. And if you try to, lodge a formal complaint up through the leadership ranks, we just had somebody a couple days ago say that she had been abused by this one leader. And when she tried to tell other SGI leaders about it, they said, since that person is your line leader, you have to just go to them. You can't come to us. You have to go to them. So they sent her back to the very person who had been abusing her. And in other cases, if someone does get what seems like a sympathetic ear, they'll be told, oh, well, that was really that leader, an expression of that leader's deep compassion for your life. They only spoke to you harshly because they want to wake you up to, so that you can become better. Or they might say, well, that leader was particularly strict with you because they knew you could take it and they see so much potential in you. That's why they're more strict with you than with other people, is because you have so much potential. Oh, it makes you crazy. And it's all gaslighting from beginning to end.
Yeah. Or you brought this on yourself because, things you did in your past life.
Yeah, too. This is your karma. Your leader was horrible to you because of your karma. You have to fix this. You have to transform yourself because you're drawing these experiences to you because of your karma.
Yeah. You need to chant more.
So it's your fault.
You need to, the scroll that's used as well, is that something that members pay for to have a one of their own? Is that something you're expected to?
Oh, yes. Yep. Last I heard, the going price is about $50.
Right.
And that cannot be deducted on your taxes as a charitable contribution because you got something. It probably costs them half of a cent to produce, but you're expected to pay this for this scroll. And you also are expected to have a special place to enshrine it. You can't get on your wall. No, it has to be protected. So you're expected to somehow get a cabinet. The traditional Japanese style one is called a butsudan, or the Buddha's house. And you hang your scroll in there, and it needs doors so you can shut it, so nobody can see it when you're not chanting to it, because this is a representation of the deepest part of your life. You can't let just everybody see that, and never take a photo of it. Oh, that's a horrible bad cause. Very, very bad. Very. Because it's your life. You don't want people seeing your life, do you? That's why I'm wearing a mask, you see? But anyhow, so you also need to get the accessories. It's called butsugu, or accessories, which will be a bell, the beads that you hold when you're chanting. You'll need to buy your sutra books and other books that have Ikeda's name on them. The more you have of those, the better. You'll need, it used to be that burning incense was absolutely required. And when my son was an infant, it was in the winter, and of course everything's closed up because it was where winter was cold. That's where we lived back then. And two of my leaders came over to do gongyo with me, to visit me, because they always visit in pairs, just like the Jehovah's Witnesses. And so when we sat down, my son was napping, and so we were at my altar in the other room, and they, of course, they said, okay, you can lead gongyo. And so I lit the candles. There's candles, and you're supposed to have greens too, not flowers, but greens. And if you want to get especially fancy, you can offer fruit, offer rice, offer sake. It just goes on and on and on. But anyhow, so I opened the doors to my butsudan and lit the candles and got ready to start gongyo. And they stopped me and said, oh, but you haven't lit the incense. And I said, well, no, I have an infant who has delicate lungs, and the house is all closed up. You don't know what's in incense smoke. Nobody knows. They said, well, you really need to light the incense. I said, well, I'm not going to. And they were very unhappy with that, but we proceeded. Now I can find they mostly aren't using incense even in the big meetings anymore. It's like, oh, these people drive you crazy. So yeah, there are costs involved up front. They don't pass the plate, but at every big meeting like the World Peace Prayer meetings, they'll have a table with envelopes where people can make contributions.
Right.
And once a year, they have a big May contribution campaign where everybody's encouraged to donate. And there'll be all these experiences. yes, I didn't have enough to pay my tuition for school, so I gave it all to the SGI and I got it back 10 times over. Yeah, it's amazing what you can do, but you're never going to find out if you don't take that plunge and just give till it hurts. They start it now, the May contribution campaign, about mid-April, and it goes till about early June. So it's more than a month. And meanwhile, they're encouraging people to leave their estates to the SGI in their wills. Your family doesn't need it. And to do monthly contributions with online automatic payroll, automatic bank deductions, auto drafts. And so, during the contribution campaign, if you're already contributing, you'll be exhorted, try giving more, even more. Some people will even get a temporary second just to have more money to give to SGI. And that's so sad.
I've just been making so many notes here and I don't even know where to start because you're giving me so much amazing information.
I'm sorry, I feel the same way.
No, it's okay. So you mentioned that you were in the movement around the 20-year mark. And I know we don't want to talk about you personally too much because, we want to focus on the effects that the movement has on people as a whole. But I think some of the experiences you had will be important for people to connect with, if that makes sense. So can you explain as anonymously as possible sort of how your involvement developed over the 20 years and how that might look slightly differently for a woman than it would for a man?
Oh, yes. Okay. One of the odd contradictions about SGI is that it's both very liberal and very conservative all at the same time. The people who join SGI tend to be on the left-wing side of the political spectrum. They're the ones who most resonate with the idea of world peace and personal development and being spiritual, things like this. But the Sokagaka itself is a very conservative, authoritarian, patriarchal organization, and in the international SGI colonies as well. What they've done is taken many of the worst aspects of Japanese culture and made this into the organization's culture. So men are the rulers. Women, it's all described as being like a family. Ikeda talks endlessly about mothers, how wonderful and warm and lovely mothers are and how they support everyone and they're so nurturing and all this. He almost never talks about fathers, but he's expected the SGI, true believers, regard him as their idealized father figure. In fact, I was listening to one big meeting on a simulcast, and when Ikeda walked into the room, after they had, some preliminary blah, blah, blah. And when Ikeda came out to great applause, he said something and his translator translated, "Your father is here."
Oh my goodness.
And I was just, my eyes flew open. I was just like, wow. Okay, so in the districts, you know what? I'm gonna go back to me for a minute. When I joined, SGI was much bigger, much, much bigger, and they had different organizational units than they do now. In a district might have several groups within it, like 2 groups, and each of those groups would have, a couple junior groups. When you got too many people for that structure, you would create a new group. Or when they got more than 3 groups, those would split off and become their own district.
Right.
And you were expected, if you wanted leadership, you were expected to go recruit members to be a leader of. That has very much changed since they have a very time recruiting anyone anymore. But anyway, I was originally put in this group called, I can't remember, something like Karchner Group. And what was funny was that because back then the groups were named after the group leader. And this one was led by a woman whose last name was Karchner, and I never saw her ever. And, oh, she's really busy. She has a baby, blah, 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 blah. And I said, look, let's change it. Let me do it. I'm the one who's coming to all the planning meetings and who's facilitating these group meetings. Let's name it after me instead. Make it Fromage Group. And eventually they did. And then, so I had these group meetings for a while, and then I was promoted to the district Young Women's Leadership. So that meant someone else had to take over my group, and my district leaders were not pleased because they'd had a hard enough time getting someone to lead this group, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But SGI has a 4-divisional leadership structure, which is often described as ironclad. They make a show of accepting gay people, non-binary people, gender fluid, gender queer people, lesbians, asexual, all this stuff. But in the end, everyone has to fit into one of these 4 boxes. It's men, women, young men, and young women. And the men are the ultimate bosses. I've seen meetings where something had to be decided and everyone in the group, in the district, wants to do one thing, and the men's division says no. And that's the end of it. Not going to do it because he said no. So that's a reflection of the Japanese family structure. Men are often, the men's division are described as the runners, in the relay for Kozen Rufu. They're like the last one, whatever you call the last one, the anchor. They're the anchors of the team running for Kozen Rufu. Meanwhile, the women are expected to be women's division leaders, the son of the family. They're supposed to be, the warm, supportive person, and the youth division are like the kids. And I remember once a joint territory young women's leader, that's way up there. She was actually salaried, by SGI.
Right.
And she once told me that any women's division member outranks her, even if that person is just a member and doesn't have any leadership position at all, just because she's in the women's division. And so there's this very subordinate ranking system going on. So I gradually, I moved pretty quickly through the leadership ranks from district to chapter, and then from chapter to headquarters. I was in what was then called a headquarters. Now I think they'd call it an area, but it was the highest young women's division leadership position locally. And so I got to hear a lot of dirt. Like, for example, my first leaders meeting as a new district young women's division leader, I was shocked when my chapter young women's leader was telling everybody that, we were talking about publications. Back then, everybody was expected to subscribe. They still are, but we were going with like paper newspapers and a glossy magazine once a month, but the newspapers were weekly. And also back then, when someone joined, a month of the weekly newspaper, $1 a week, was included with their joining fee. Okay. And if they decided not to renew, the person who had introduced them was expected to pick up their subscription. So this chapter, Young Women's League, yes, I love that face. Like,
no
oh my
way.
God.
That is so much pressure.
I know. So she told the group that she was already carrying 10 extra subscriptions that she could barely afford. She was a student. She could hardly afford these. And it was making her think twice about trying to introduce anybody else.
Yeah, that's so naughty, especially because from what Mark was saying in his episode, the best thing you could do for SGI is bring a new member in, and you're you're doted on and you're basically love bombed all over again if you can bring in new members. So that was one of the best things you could do as a member of SGI. So to have that pressure, and then on top of the financial pressure of those people not coming back, and you're expected to pick up their financial obligation.
Because back then, no one was ever allowed to cancel a subscription. You couldn't cancel your own. You weren't allowed to. I mean, the only way you could do it basically was to leave the SGI, and then what are they going to do? But this was also a copy of what went on in Japan back in the day. So they would pressure people to, renew their subscriptions. They'd get a home visit and they'd kind of lean on them. Well, you got $4, right? Come on, give me, type of thing. So back then, the SGI in the USA was claiming 500,000 members and with 100,000 subscriptions. But they started allowing people to cancel their subscriptions. The subscriptions immediately dropped to 20,000. Mm-hmm. And subscriptions are actually a reliable proxy for the active membership, because the active members always subscribe. The members who, came to 3 meetings and then disappeared, well, they're still counted as members. They're not subscribing, So that was at my first district leaders meeting. And, leaders meetings were quite the coveted affairs, because there you got to hear the hurt. And you were special if you got to go. And of course, you were special if you got appointed to leadership positions. Now, how I mentioned that the district is supposed to be considered a family? Mm-hmm. Well, when I first joined, my district women's division leader just was so caring and warm, all the, oh, I'm your new mother love bombing. And since I didn't have a very good relationship with my own mother, I ate that up with a spoon. Well, as soon as the organization promoted me out of that district and made me chapter, she turned into the wicked stepmother. And she was just nasty, just horrible. But anyhow, because SGI's membership has collapsed so much, it used to be junior group, district. Now it's just district as the bottom level of organization. And they're supposed to get 4 division leadership within the district. So a men's division leader, a women's division leader, and young women's and young men's leaders. What happens is they very often put form over function. If there's one young man in the group, they'll make him a district leader, even though there are no young men for him to lead. Oh, you're expected to go out and bring some in. Easier said than done. The leadership in SGI seems to think that setting the goals for other people is the hardest job in the world. That all they have to do is do it. Come on, just do it. Back when in 2018, they had a 50K Lions of Justice Festival that they worked on for 2 years to try and get more youth into the organization. That was the goal. It was limited to ages 11 to 39. That was what they considered youth. That's pretty much casting as broad a net as you can, right? And they weren't allowing parents to go with their minor children. No, this is just for the youth. We'll assign an older youth chaperone for your child. And that was a deal breaker for a lot of SGI parents. And honestly, do you want your 11-year-old hanging around with 39-year-olds? Ew, that's creepy. My nephew is serving a life sentence for child molestation. He started molesting his stepdaughter when she was 11 and a half.
Ugh.
He was like 34 then, you know, and ain't no way my minor child's going anywhere without his mama, you know, this sort of thing. But they often do try to get children away from their parents. I remember when my son was in 5th grade, I was told about a day trip up to Soka University, because I live in California, that all the kids were going on. No parents, just the kids. And I was like, why would a 5th grader need to go to an all-day introduction to a university? That just seemed really odd to me. And so I said, no, you know, my son, his interest right now is paleontology. And if he still likes that, when the time comes, we're going to be looking at the colleges that have the best paleontology programs. And Soka U only offers a general liberal arts degree, just liberal arts. That's it.
Yeah.
It's a horrible sham.
And we don't want to tar everyone with the same brush as well. You know, it's not to say that every single 39-year-old is going to be a creep, but if there are
no, of course not.
If there are functions and events that are set up where it is common knowledge that children will be without their parents, you know, that those are potentially the types of environments that predators might be drawn towards, because they know that you know, there is the opportunity to find unsupervised young children. And also, I just feel like from the things you've spoken about, from the doctrine and the, you know, the very patriarchal Japanese culture aspect of SGI and things like asking people to pick up you know subscriptions. I know that was a few years ago, but I don't know if I would want my child to go to you know, because children are very susceptible at that age to manipulation and you know, methods of control and just, you know, they are receptacles at that age, aren't they, to just be fed knowledge and information. And that's basically what happens at school. You know, you go to school and you're
indoctrination told, it goes
told,
straight
yeah,
in.
1 + 1 is 2, and you're like, yep, okay, I'm in school, I'm a sponge, and all this information is going in. You know, it's one method of teaching as opposed to facilitation in especially in the education system over here. But so I don't know if I would want my child, with or without the 39-year-olds, or, you know, or older people being a part of it, just for my child to go to events like that, workshops, you know, that are probably quite long. And
yes, and they were. And also some of these involved long bus trips, like several-hour bus trips, you know, and if the parents wanted to go there, they would be directed to a nearby SGI center where they could just chant while the kids were off in this auditorium or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you brought up that word predators, because any group that's organized like this is going to be a huge screaming risk for predators. And one of the things that we have seen is that SGI has not made a publicly available database of every person who's been charged with or convicted of you know, violence or abuse or things like this. And I've had several reports of young women who were raped by male leaders. And they were, when they went to the upper SGI leadership to report it, they were told, this is your karma. You need to chant for his happiness, and you mustn't ever say anything. You have to protect the SGI.
Yeah,
that's a big undercurrent. You have to protect Ikeda, protect the SGI. And so they just freak out when they see us publishing, you know, the horrible things we've found about SGI and about Ikeda. No, you know, type reaction. And they supposedly have put in place a harassment hotline where you can call and report things or this and that. But people have reported that, you know, if they ever did an investigation, they sent people who were hostile to the victim and who wouldn't accept the evidence she provided, and who then dismissed it as not enough evidence to make her complaint.
Right.
And I heard of one young woman who was an up-and-coming leader, and she was in an abusive relationship with a young men's up-and-coming leader, and he was physically violent with her. And when she was told not to leave him, first off, but when she did leave him, she asked to be transferred to, a different branch of the organizational structure so she wouldn't have to see him all the time. They refused. She was forced to stay in that same group, seeing him all the time. And her ascendancy up the leadership ladder stopped, whereas he ended up being promoted all the way to the national leadership ranks.
That's absolutely disgusting.
What you find, and this is a really hard thing to wrap your mind around, what they say is wonderful and lovely and nice, but the reality is the opposite.
Yep, it's the same with Jehovah's Witnesses. Like the amount of abuse.
All the cults do this.
Yeah, all the just through the interviews I did, the level of abuse that basically when the elders were told about it, it was like, well, don't go to law enforcement, and that's all we're going to do about it, and that person will face Jehovah one day. And it's like, but that's not good enough, right? Because they've ruined somebody's life, and now you're making that person who's had these horrible things happen to them make them feel like it's their fault, and you're not protecting them from that. You're not the problem with organizations that have internal sort of investigations into these reported cases of abuse. It's not good enough to have an internal system, because it's completely biased, and then it's gonna, if it is a patriarchal system, it's gonna favor the man, even if he is the abuser, and it's gonna allow him to continue to flourish, whilst the woman is subjected to probably horrible, even if it's just an uncomfortable atmosphere, just to not be granted the opportunity to move to a different group in itself is a form of abuse. It is. The self-policing doesn't work. There has to be independent investigations, or law enforcement has to be involved. It's the same, like it didn't work with the Jehovah's Witnesses, and now they're being sued and they're going through the courts, and they're going to lose their tax exempt status. That there are so many cases of abuse in the courts right now, especially in the UK, against members of the Jehovah's Witnesses who have covered up abuse, who have perpetrated abuse, and SGI should be careful, because if there are things like that going on that aren't being reported to law enforcement, if they find out, I'm sure it's the same with a lot of different movements, but that's why subreddits like the one that you work on are so important, because people need to open up and talk about these things. This needs to become common knowledge.
That's right. And a side angle on that is, supposedly it's the SGI's traditional culture to have its discussion meetings held in someone's home. They think that makes it a warm, family-like atmosphere. Well, multi-level marketing scams do that too. They have their sales, meetings in people's homes. That's not what makes a family, but you're expected to open up your home to anybody who is brought. You don't know these people. You don't know who they are. People are encouraged to bring guests. You don't know what this guest is all about. One time, one of our regulars described how they went to get their coat out of the coat closet, and the man's jacket was there with a loaded firearm in the pocket and a big wad of cash. Mm-hmm. And that was from the man who lived at the home where they were having their meeting.
Yeah, I was about to say, I mean, in America, it's so different than it is over here, because you can have, you can have weapons, and you can have firearms, in most states. And I was just thinking, like, you could go to somebody's house and not know anything about them, and they could just have guns in every room, or you could invite someone into your house and they could just come with a loaded gun that they just carry around with them. Like, that to me is such an alien
Absolutely.
concept.
Oh, well, it's a horrible concept, because rather than, SGI describes the having it in someone's home setting as making it warm and family-like, but in practice, that means that the homeowner is taking on all the liability, all the risks, all the wear and tear to the, to the meeting place, all the costs, and meanwhile, they often will not allow members to have their meetings in the local center, even if it's not being used at that time. Because as you can see, this puts all the costs onto the members, while SGI just happily takes their donations. And by the way, SGI does not help any needy members at all. If you've lost your job and you can't pay your utility bill, well, you better chant to fix that. If somebody helps you, then they'll just be prolonging your negative karma. You got to fix this yourself. Go to the Gohonzon. They do not contribute to charity. In the wake of the COVID pandemic, you know how much SGI USA donated? 10,000 masks. That is probably less than $2,200. And they have multi-million-dollar properties all over. Just at the beginning of 2018, a little bird dropped a news report onto our board about a 20-bedroom, $12 million. No, not 12. Sorry. It's a 20-bedroom luxury mansion in North Tustin, which is just outside of Los Angeles, that SGI USA had purchased on the sly in 2002 or 3, whenever it was when I was still very active in leadership here and in LA. And I would have heard about it if it had been common knowledge. And now it's 20 bedrooms and, oh my gosh, indoor gardens, giant koi pond. Everything was very much the Japanese sensibility. And it was going on the market for $20 million. And they were hoping that would just slip right under the members' noses. This is what their hard-earned, give till it hurts contributions are going toward. And what was this property being used for? Nobody knows. Nobody's saying. Was this where, see, one of the ways that religions are often used to launder money is that you can bring a certain amount of cash into the country in your pocket, right? Here, I believe it's 10 or 15,000 at a time, without having to disclose anything or file any reports. So if the Soka Gakkai sends 15 or 20 people over for a religious visit to California, and they go stay at this luxury mansion, and each one of them was carrying $10,000, let's say it's 20 people. That's quick math. Is that 200,000?
Don't look at me when it comes to mathematics. I thought you were originally going to say that they potentially could be laundering money through real estate, because that's obviously a very easy.
They have a reputation for paying for properties with suitcases of cash. And they will often pay not just the asking price, but they've been known to offer twice the asking price to get a hold of a certain property that they want. They just have nobody knows why they have so much money. Most of their membership is poor, lower class, and they come online all the time to say, oh yeah, I've never made a donation. They never make us donate. There's no pressure. Yet they have unlimited money. How? They own castles across Europe. This $20 million mansion, that's, chump change for them. They have properties all over the US. When you start digging into it and finding out about it, it's just mind-boggling. In Japan, their biggest center is in Tokyo, which has some of the highest property values in the world. They have a huge art museum with so many fine art masterpieces from Europe and elsewhere that they can only put about 5% of their collection on display at any one time. Ikeda went through, back at a certain point, I don't remember if it was, I think it was in the 70s, mid 70s, fine art was being used as a method as a tax shelter. So lots of people in Japan were buying fine art masterpieces, and Ikeda bought so many that he alone inflated world fine art prices just from his purchases.
Wow.
It's just unbelievable.
What's interesting about something you mentioned before. Oh, sorry, my partner's just bringing me a cup of tea. Thanks, babe.
Lovely.
Yeah, something I was going to mention before when you said about the donation of masks. On the flip side of that, there is a chance that through the pandemic, I mean, I know America's been a bit different than it has been over here, in terms of the lockdown over here, I think, has been a bit stricter from what I've seen on the news anyway, and social media around a lot of blasé attitudes towards the pandemic in certain parts of America. I mean, I don't know what it's like where you are, but at the beginning of it, where every kind of country seemed to go into universal lockdown with quite strict measures, there is the small window where SGI could have lost what little money they were being given through donations because of their lack of face-to-face group gatherings. But I mean, I'm sure they've picked up again since March.
Well, SGI is still doing just online Zoom meetings for its meetings. They still are not having any face-to-face meetings. But even if they lose all their donations, their Soka University has an endowment of over $1.25 billion. And because it's a university endowment, they don't have to even put 5% of it toward the purpose of the institution the way charities do. Charities have to put at least 5% of what they collect toward the work they're collecting for.
That's crazy.
And many do, no more than that. But everything that's being earned by that endowment can be used for anything. Mm-hmm. And just think how much interest a $1.25 billion endowment is earning.
I suppose as well, you mentioned the online money transfer that's being encouraged as well. So there is also the potential that is something that has increased during lockdown. And if you're ill and you miss a donation session, and you end up keeping that $5-10, however much you would usually donate, because you can't make it that to that particular meeting. Obviously, if you're doing the online money transfer instead, then you're never going to miss a payment because it's just going to automatically keep coming out of your account. So, I mean, when it comes to discussing movements and COVID, it's like, this could be happening. Oh, but this could be happening. Oh, but this could be happening. Oh, yeah, but this is probably happening. So I'm sure groups are still working out a way to extort their members, whether it's financially, emotionally, time, whatever it is.
Well, when we locked down in March for the first one, and a lot of businesses closed and a lot of people were out of work. And by May contribution campaign, SGI did not cancel that or suspend that. No, it was, donations as usual. We on Sgi Whistleblowers thought that was incredibly tone deaf, and we also think that having to do online meetings is going to really strike a possibly fatal blow at SGI USA, because if people aren't getting together, they aren't getting that trance state, and they're not getting their goodies. But even if every single gaijin person drops SGI like a hot rock, it will still survive because they have unlimited money. The white, the gaijin, the foreign people's money, that doesn't matter at all. All they do, in fact, one researcher found that SGI grows by exporting SGI members from Japan, Soka Gakkai members from Japan. That's how it grows. So if they want a presence in a given country, they go and they buy a building, and then they ship over a few salaried Soka Gakkai faithful to run it, and voila, they are now a religion. Although it's now truly a Japanese religion for Japanese people, that's still a valid reason to have a religion. There are plenty of Korean Christian churches around that do their services in Korean. So that's not an obstacle in any way for SGI. If they only survive as a cultural Japanese club for Japanese people under the guise of a religion, they will survive that way. And they can. It's easy. And they will still have inexplicably massive amounts of money and properties and valuables and everything.
Yeah, it's kind
estimated that it's worth, it's been estimated that it's worth upwards of $300 billion US, the whole conglomerate, Soka Gakkai SGI. And the Soka Gakkai rep in Japan said, that's wrong, and that's all.
Oh, fantastic.
Nobody really knows. Yeah.
It's difficult as well because I know that some people have said, especially on the community is particularly vocal on my YouTube videos, because the podcast episodes automatically get uploaded to YouTube as well, just with sort of like a wave form going through the video.
Yeah, I've seen it.
So there's no graphics or actual video content to speak of, but if you've read through any of the comments, there's a lot of people that are practicing members of SGI that will come and contest the information that's been said in the episode, and a lot of the time people will say that we don't understand it because it's a traditional Japanese movement. But that being said, as you've mentioned with Japanese culture, there are parts of that culture that are quite archaic, that don't quite fit with the Western culture that we experience, in terms of me as a woman trying to obtain some level of equality amongst my male peers, and my friends and family who may identify with the LGBTQIA community, who are also trying to find some level of equality within the community themselves, to then bring in aspects of patriarchal Japanese culture. It just doesn't work. Those two things can't go together. So when people come forward and say, oh, you just don't understand SGI because you're not open to Japanese culture or Japanese religion, and that's why you're being ignorant to the cause, I don't know if it's that at all, because when I did the Jehovah's Witnesses coverage, even the way they talk about the patriarchal system that functions in their movement, that's not Japanese culture, that's Western culture. And I still can't sit there and listen to it and think that that's something I would ever willingly be a part of, because it's so oppressive for women. It's awful to listen to the way that the women are treated. And obviously, as a woman myself, I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, I think it's okay that you're, treated that way and forced to dress that way and told to look a certain way and act a certain way. For me to sit here and be like, oh yeah, I've got friends and family who would never be accepted or loved because of their sexuality, and their sexual orientation. That's a horrible thought for me. It's really difficult when people come to me to challenge the information that I've been given from other people that have come forward to speak about their experiences, because I want to be open to both sides, which is why I mentioned the email I received at the start of the episode. I want to hear about that person's positive experiences around SGI, because I want to believe that there are people having positive experiences. I don't want to believe that all of the people involved in SGI are having this abuse inflicted on them. That's a horrible thought. But at the same time, like, I don't want to be a part of something that feels like it's going back in time rather than forward in terms of equal rights. I don't know. Yeah. I'm kind of just rambling on, but it just makes me angry.
No, you're absolutely right. The family model in SGI is very Norman Rockwell. And, I'm glad you touched again on the whole quilt bag spectrum of people. The Soka Gakkai's political party in Japan, Komeito, is controlled by the Soka Gakkai. They were forced to take out the religious element in 1970 because there was this big publishing scandal because they tried to use their newfound power to lean on publishers to not publish critics. But it's still completely controlled by Ikeda and the Soka Gakkai. And they recently voted against same-sex marriage. Against. Even though in Japanese society and business, there's widespread support for same-sex marriage being legalized. Soka Gakkai's political party voted against. And something they recently put out says that the way they're going to support their gender non-conforming members, is that they should decide whether they want one of the division's support, and if so, attend that division's activities, or if they prefer to be just with the 4 divisional, mix, and in that case, go to those meetings. But there is no special group for them where they can talk about their unique experiences. Let's suppose a transgender woman is put in with the young women's division, who all have just the cishet, or, maybe cis lesbian, whatever, experience, but none of the transition. That person would probably have far more in common with a trans man, because they're both dealing with transition issues. But no, they're expected to just go with whichever of the 4 groups, or just the 4 groups. And even where there have been gay meetings or whatever, they're still expected to invite a senior leader from SGI who will give final guidance. And this person is almost always a cishet person. So just like if you were to have, say, a Native American group that wanted to have meetings, just the Native Americans, they'd still be expected to have a senior leader from SGI come to give final guidance, who's likely to be a white person or a Japanese person.
Yeah,
so it's just so tone deaf. And what I discovered, and I think this is fascinating, is that it is the ones who fit into the 4 boxes that are most accepted. And I'll clarify that. If you are a lesbian who identifies as a woman, you would be in the YWD or the women's division, and nobody would have any problem with that. But if you're a gender nonconforming person and you want to, say, do the young men's brass band and go to the men's division study meeting and be in the women's division chorus and also participate in the young women's fife and drum corps, well, they're going to have a big problem with you because you're not playing by the rules. You have to choose one box and stick with it.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that's kind of translates into a lot of the experiences that this community group have had in general society. So, if you're looking for a group of acceptance that won't ask questions or expect you to fit into a neat, tidy box, why would you pick someone or a group like SGI when I'm sure there are groups out there that won't ask questions or expect you to be able to tick one box, and that's the box you belong to, so to speak.
They aren't told that up front. It's all deceptive recruiting.
There you go.
Everybody's equal. Whee!
Yeah, and then also when you mentioned about Japan and their views kind of moving forward with things like same-sex relationships and same-sex marriage, like religions and groups alike have to do the same thing. It's the same. It's been the same, in parts of Europe. Religion has to, the Pope has talked about it himself. Move forward with the times. You can't stay. You can't stay in that period of time where, if you're gay, you could be sentenced to death. Like the people can't have that mentality anymore, because that's not the world we live in. So, the
SGI used to require its leaders to be married. And if you were a gay man who was a candidate to be promoted, you had to get married. And I remember hearing one man talking about this. So he found, a nice enough woman who was willing to do this arrangement. And then shortly thereafter, there was one of the Japanese leaders in his face screaming at him, "You have to make love to your wife. You have to make babies for Kozen Rufu."
Oh, gosh.
Just crazy stuff. In fact, the place I started practicing, there were two headquarters, and the other headquarters was the men's division leader for the headquarters was an obviously gay man. And I was told that he had recently gotten divorced from this woman who was a chapter leader, and she was obviously a lesbian, but they'd been forced to marry. So it was definitely a marriage of convenience for them, because neither one was each other's cup of asparagus, you know what I'm saying? And so, SGI, most of its membership is female. It's 2-to-1, female to male. So I don't even know. They decided to make gay-friendly noises because gay people have a lot of money to spend, and all that. But still, it is very old-fashioned. No religion, especially an intolerant one, is going to be on the vanguard of societal change. They all have to be dragged kicking and screaming into the modern era because they have been profiting from the status quo. That's why religions never, ever fight against the status quo in any meaningful way. I was reading this book about racism in Christianity, and what the authors said is that people join religions to get their own needs met. I'm joining a religion for me, for what I want, of course. And given the choice between joining the church of meaning and belonging, or joining the church of meaning and belonging through sacrifice, they're going to join the former. They want to have everything for themselves. I want to be about me. I want to get my needs met. And that whole chant for whatever you want that SGI promotes, the people in SGI tend to be so self-centered and just so, like
is it holier than thou?
Oh, yes. When I was still a new member, I knew someone who he needed to have some painting done on his house. And where I was practicing, they at that time had this Metro Paint-a-thon. It was a big summer event where companies would sponsor teams and the paint company would donate the paint and they'd get applications and we'd go to paint old people's homes for free. It was just a lovely program. So I said, I think it'd be really nice if we did this as a volunteer project. And one of the men's division members said, he snorted in disgust and said, "I'm not spending my Saturday doing some dope's maintenance for him. Forget that." And this was in 1987. I'm still seeing that attitude in SGI today. They're like, when people they tell people, oh, if you want to volunteer, you go ahead. Maybe you can get your district to volunteer with you. But when people suggest it to their districts, their district members like, no, forget it, because it's all about them. And it just ends up being so self-centered, so insular, so inbred. It's just icky.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a constant source of embarrassment to me that SGI does not do anything charitable for anyone. I was told by, this old lady, Japanese lady, where I started practicing that, oh, it's only because SGI is so young and as a movement in this country so far. Once we're more established, then we'll start volunteering like they do in Japan. Oh, in Japan, people volunteer all the time. The Sokagakai doctors division will go out to the hinterlands to provide free medical care on their one day off. Well, okay, SGI is now started here officially in 1960. So here we are 60 years later. When's it going to be mature enough to start doing anything charitable for anyone? I'd like to know. Oh, and back to a question that you brought up a long, long time ago. One of the reasons I stayed in for 20 years was I was told that if you practice sincerely for 20 years, this is separate from the whole we're going to take over the world in 20 years, but 20 keeps coming up. If you practice sincerely for 20 years, then by your 20th year, all the fortune you've accumulated is going to start just fire hosing onto your life. The universe is going to turn on the valve and all these benefits are going to start appearing in your life so much, so massive that you're going to be like, please, universe, can you hold back the benefits for just 5 seconds so I can catch my breath? Well, 20 years, nothing happened. And I didn't like what I was seeing. So I was done.
Yeah.
It's all the broken promises. And if you call them on it, oh, well, you're being selfish. You're being, you're having doubts. You're complaining. You need to do your human revolution. It's always your fault.
It's interesting actually that you said that, because I've been, since the inauguration the other day, I've been reading a few articles around the QAnon movement, and there's been a lot of people that have been a part of the movement that are suddenly realizing that, all these promises of events that would take place to stop Biden from being sworn in, they just didn't happen. So people are finally realizing that this whole, Trump's going to save the world rhetoric that they've been buying into for the last few years, it just doesn't seem like there's any truth to it. And a lot of people that were so invested in this financially, politically, to the point where their relationships have broken down. They've found themselves without cars, without homes, without wives, husbands, or contact with their children. Are suddenly having this realization that it was all for nothing, basically. And I've just finished some coverage on the Anthill Kids as well. And Rock Terrio, who was the leader of the Anthill Kids, he was originally a Seventh-day Adventist, and they are quite infamous, really, for having several doomsday prophecy dates come and go without anything happening. And then Rock Terrio himself, he had a date that he put into place, and the parents of his followers sat there and waited for that day to come and go. And when it came and went, they were so sure that their kids would come home to them and realize that he was a fraud, and they just didn't. They just stayed with him because they believed that, he said, oh, the date just didn't match up with heaven's timeline, and they believed that. So there's both sides, isn't there? There's, you opened your eyes after 20 years and said, oh, hang on a minute, no thanks, that's enough. Some of these QAnon followers have been like, well, Joe Biden's president, what happened? Whereas some Q followers are like, no, there is a plan, it's still going to happen, it's just been delayed. So it's interesting to see just where people's loyalties and commitment to these causes, how far they go in terms of false promises and things. But I've got two last questions to ask you before I hand it over to you and ask if there's anything you want to add. And one of them is, The partner that you're with now, were they also a member of SGI? And if so, did you leave at the same time? And where is SGI's leader? What do you think has happened to him?
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, no, my dear husband, we just had our 29th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. He was never in SGI, but I knew his sister in the Young Women's Division. And in fact, at one point, I let her move in with me for a few months, and she had her brother and their father over to dinner. And I came in as they were finishing up and was like, whoa, she wasn't very attractive. And he was hot. Oh, smoking. So anyway, we were engaged within 3 months and married within less than a year.
Wow.
Total whirlwind. And there had been this kind of undercover doctrine within SGI that if the woman's faith is right on, the man will want to practice. He will want to be an SGI member, and that this is just automatic. And so, I pressured him to chant and stuff, and he had chanted before, even got a car out of it apparently, but he just wasn't interested. He's also an atheist, and he's a scientist. And I have a sciencey mathy mind too, so that probably explains it. And I had this realization that if he decided to join a church and were pressuring me to go to church, which I hate, and to become a Christian when I loathe Christianity, I just thought how miserable I would be if he were doing that. Mm-hmm. So I completely backed off. And in fact, I brought this up, my YWD, Young Women's Joint Territory leader. I said, this is totally wrong to make women responsible for what a man is going to choose either to do or not to do, because they have freedom just like anybody does, and agency, and there's no reason to believe this is true, and it's just making them crazy. And a month later, there was something in one of the publications to that effect, that, we don't expect women to automatically, that their boyfriends or husbands or significant others are going to want to practice and all that stuff.
Interesting.
He was, but he was supportive the whole way, and nice enough. He was very busy with work, so I was pretty much doing my own thing. He's still very busy with work. So he was supportive, but he never joined. Well, a few months before I left in like February of 2007, in August of 2006, there was this leaders meeting with one of the national leaders about a new membership card campaign. Now, what they were going to do with the membership cards was make out a membership card for every roommates, spouse, children, whether they were SGI members or not. They were going to make out SGI membership cards for them. I said, hang on, why don't we ask them if this is okay? Do it on an opt-in basis. And it's like, no, we're just going to do it. We're just going to have, fill out membership cards for them to provide better support to our members. Yeah. And I said, you know what? Yeah. My husband has top secret security clearance. He is not an SGI member and does not want to be one, and he does not want a religious organization keeping his personal information on file. Can I make sure that he is not added without his consent? Because he would never give consent. And the answer from this national leader, I knew a lot of the national leaders, but I didn't know this one. He said, we have lots of members who have top secret security clearance, and they don't mind having their names on a membership card. I said, he's not a member. He's not a member. So he should not be on a membership card. And this man, this leader, national leader was a man, said, this is the new membership card campaign. And that was the end of it. And I was so steamed. And after that, my chapter men's division leader came up and said, we'll make sure there's no membership card made out for your husband.
Yeah,
And,
it sounds like they just needed like an influx of new members for their statistics or something.
I've since confirmed that they did go through with that. It was because Ikeda was unhappy at the dropping membership numbers. So they had this campaign and everyone was supposed to fill in all these membership cards so it looked better on paper. And the national general director, the leader, was very happy and Japan was very happy. And it was just totally bizarre.
And your partner now, I'm guessing he must support the work you do around the subreddit, because obviously the time that you've spent archiving and researching and stuff must be quite significant. So he must be supportive of the work that you're doing.
Oh, he's cool with whatever I do. I mean, he's still going to work because he has a company for doing a certain kind of research. So I do it all while he's at work.
Right.
And, when we're at home, we have our family time and we're fine. But also, we live on a farm now. And we've got lots of fruit trees and a little over 1.5 acres in avocados. So we've got 166 avocado trees and we wholesale the fruit. So
that sounds like idyllic.
Oh my God, I love it. I do the fertilizing, the weeding. He helps with harvest, which is great because he's this great, big, strong guy. And I have a guy who trims because I don't know how to do that. But everything else, I manage the watering. I do all the paperwork that's related, for the ag department, California Ag Department. Just everything is what I do. And so that works out really well because he doesn't have enough spare time to do the grove as well. And he doesn't want to. He'll come out, we harvest together, and it's really kind of fun. It's hard work, but it's fun work. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Like
so you've got your thing, he's got his thing, and then you've got this thing that you do together. Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, a farm just sounds...
Oh, it's perfect.
Lovely. Yeah.
And we've got all these cats because, whenever you have a farm, you have a lot of rodents, and boy, they earn their keep. I tell you what. And we have this elderly, very small toy poodle who pretty much just sleeps all the time.
Oh, wow.
So I managed to carve out some space for Sgi Whistleblowers. Trust me.
Yeah. And what about the leader of SGI? What are your predictions on where he's actually disappeared to? Because nobody's publicly seen him for a decade.
Well, I have concluded that they're storing him in a city called Nagano, Japan.
Right.
All the latest pictures or reports have been from Nagano. So I've pretty much narrowed it down to that's where they're keeping him. But, I think they've got a bit of a problem doctrinally, because in the past they have made such a big deal about having a living mentor. We have a living mentor. Other religions, they're all about some dead guy long ago, but we, the SGI, we have a living mentor.
Mm-hmm.
So for all I know, he could be stuffed in some chest freezer in the sub-basement in a utility closet of their great big Tokyo building. And it wouldn't even have to be a particularly big chest freezer because he's a real small person. But I think we have some informal wagering going on the site about when they're going to announce he's dead. Now, his nemesis, High Priest Niken from Nichiren Shoshu, who was responsible for his excommunication, and let me tell you, Ikeda is the king of grudge holding. So that's why, to this day, SGI members have to hate Nichiren Shoshu, even though they officially embrace interfaith. Not Nichiren Shoshu, just not for Nichiren Shoshu. Fine. So that guy ended up living to 96. So Ikeda, if he's still alive, he'd be just turned 93, I think. Yeah, just turned 93. So maybe they're hanging on to make the announcement until he laps High Priest Niken. Oh, our mentor made it to 97. Ha ha, that means he's better. Or who knows? They've been keeping him absolutely under wraps no videos, no public appearances, and just churning out more and more and more ghostwritten material. Because you look at the pictures of this guy, then there is nobody home in there.
That's weird, because our queen's like a similar age and she's still out and about and pretty vocal.
Everywhere.
And
she's everywhere.
She's
and
doing
Prince
her
Philip,
bit.
What's wrong with this guy? How can he be a genuine leader if he's not being seen and interacting with his congregants, with his organization?
It's very strange.
It is very strange.
I'll be intrigued to see if and when they announce it, or maybe to see him do a public appearance and everyone be like, wow, wasn't expecting that. So I will just have to.
We've been asking for that. That'd be so easy. Just have him go on a talk show, one of the Japanese talk shows, and be interviewed. 5 minutes, all it takes. No, but some think that just as there was a big battle over the presidency after Toda died, and it took Ikeda just over 2 years to come out on top of that, that there's going to be some serious infighting for control of this multi-billion-dollar fortune that the Soka Gakkai controls.
Yeah.
All of the property titles, the deeds, are held by Tokyo, are held in Japan. So the buildings in the US are owned by the Soka Gakkai in Japan, and it makes all the decisions, all of them. So some think he's going to that he wants to push that pasty, sneering, resting face son of his, Hiromasa, into the presidency, because he's been making appearances and accepting honorary awards in his father's place, this and that. But then it's going to look even more nepotistic, like Kim Jong next, like a North Korean dictatorship. So that would be very bad optics. And what's funny is Ikeda's favorite son, who looked the most like him, died at age 29 back in, I think, 85? Was it 85? Whatever, 84, of a perforated ulcer. Even then, that sort of thing was almost never fatal.
Yeah.
So he has 2 sons left. You hardly ever see the younger son, but he has no grandchildren. He's 93, and his sons have not reproduced. Apparently, the one that died had a couple of grandchildren, and the rumor was that son's widow had been one of Ikeda's favorite mistresses, whom he hooked up with his son. Yes, and she was supposed to be quite a beauty. Well, right after he died, the wife, Ikeda's wife, was saying, I just can't believe how close we are. We couldn't be closer if she were my own daughter, and we're going to support them and help them with the grandchildren and all this stuff. And then she disappears. And apparently this is a thing that happens in Japan, kind of dividing the family, because they don't have the same view of like visitation or rights. If a woman wants to divorce her husband's whole family, she can do that. And she walks and she takes the kids, and they never see them again. And though they have disappeared from the Ikeda family picture completely. If she was beautiful, and rumor has it she probably had no trouble finding a new husband. And I don't know if her children with her first husband, Ikeda's son, even know they're related to the Ikedas.
Yeah, or on the more sinister
they'd be in their 30s by now.
They might not have wanted the scandal,
involved.
So they, remove the problem or paid her off or anything.
Oh,
that is scandalous. What if the children were Ikeda's children? That's what I thought immediately as you said that. It's like the movies. It feels like when you talked about it, then it sounded like.
I never thought that.
Well, they could well be, couldn't it? It could well be. I mean, if she was one of his favorites, there's nothing to stop. And I mean, I'm not saying he is anything like Reverend Moon, but if he is, then he wasn't faithful to his wife anyway. So, big, powerful billionaire man.
There's a long, there was a big scandal. It's called the Gekkan Pen, Pen scandal. That's the name of a tabloid that ran an expose about some of his mistresses. And of course, the Soka Gakkai took it to court and they nominally won, but their winning involved them paying some like $2 million to the Gekken Pen. And the judge in the case said, even if it's not true, Ikeda has brought this onto himself because he always travels with a beautiful single woman. And there are special facilities for him at all the big centers that are reserved just for him. And they have a space for him and a space for this traveling companion. And I think I even found a picture of one. And whoa, talk about a bombshell. She was gorgeous. But anyway, so he's known for, keeping intimate company with single women, and where no one else is allowed, like being in the same apartment together with nobody else. Who knows what they're doing in there? I'm sure they're just chanting daimoku together. Right. And there's even been talk because, the SGI's worst nightmare is the leaders who leave because they know what's going on underneath. And leaders from Japan have said that Ikeda likes to play games with people. Like he'll eat half a peach and then give it to someone else who's in the Soka Gakkai and they have to finish it. Or he'll drink half a beer and give the remaining half a beer he's the most powerful, to anyone else, and they have to drink it. And he does something similar with the Soka Gakkai men, the staff with their wives. He will sleep with their wife and then see if the man will take her back. Or he will assign one of his mistresses to be married to one of these staffers, and he has to marry her.
Or one of his sons.
To prove his loyalties. Yeah, who knows? He tried to get one of his mistresses elected by the Komeito back in the day. Tried to give her a seat, in the government. So this guy is just dirty. He's just bad. Ugh.
Or was. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah. They've cut his allowance. No more of the shiny Gucci suits and the handmade shoes for him. No, he's sitting around in grandpa wear because the Soka Gakkai pulled his allowance.
I just wonder where he is. Is he alive or not? I kind of don't need to know what condition he's in or anything. Just yes or no really would be nice to know. I'm one of these people that watches unsolved mysteries and then gets really mad because the mystery's not solved.
Me too.
And I kind of knew it wouldn't be.
Apparently he's had his feet amputated. Both
What?
or one, not sure, from diabetes. Yes, he's apparently had a couple of major strokes, and are really weird, so weird. Like they had a picture of him in a room with like 4 round tables, with chairs, and the table that he's sitting at with his wife has a tablecloth on it, and she is in front of the camera, and all you can see of him is what's above the table. And he's wearing dark glasses, and they're inside. And it was supposedly in a library, but for the longest time, I thought it was a cafeteria, because why would you have a tablecloth in a library? And in some pictures where they've hauled him out to be seen by certain Soka Gakkai faithful in Japan, he's in a weird car that looks like a cross between like one of those between a golf cart and a Mini Cooper. So these little tiny tall cars, and he's always sitting in the car. You can't see his legs.
Like the Pope Mobile.
Yes, except, all these photographs, you can't see his legs, or they'll prop him up behind a desk and he's looking down at paper like he's writing, and his wife's all with her biggest, grinniest grin, but you can't see his legs because of the desk.
Strange.
It's in the way. All of these pictures, they're all choreographed. So, with like this here, so you can't see that his pen isn't actually touching the paper, and, you can't see his legs. And if he is looking up, he's wearing dark glasses, so you can't see his eyes. Because when you could see his eyes, they weren't focused. He has not smiled since 2010. None of these pictures feature him smiling. He cannot smile anymore. So how is this consistent with the diamond-like state of indestructible happiness that he promised to everyone if they devoted their lives to the SGI?
I just wonder if it's a double, or maybe he's just really
sometimes
old and unwell, or
yeah.
maybe he's cryogenically frozen.
Maybe they'll mummify him like Lennon, Why not?
Maybe,
what
maybe.
Fun.
But anyway, before we finish, because we are running out of time, sure. I just wanted to draw everybody that would be interested to the subreddit. So it is called Sgi Whistleblowers. And I just wanted to
one word.
Yes, I just wanted to hand it over to you to ask if there's anything you wanted to mention specifically about the subreddit, or anything that we've missed.
Oh, let me think. Well, for a world peace organization, it's really odd how much military terminology they use. Everything's a fight. Everything's a struggle. They're all about victory and triumph, and we will win. And they're battling. They refer to themselves as a fighting fortress. How is a group that is so steeped in imagery of conflict, how are they ever going to contribute to world peace? And, we get that from the SGI members who attack us online. We have this little support Reddit where we listen to each other, and we have a space where we can tell our stories, and, we help each other where we can. And they hate us. They want to see us shut down. They try to shame us into shutting down. They attack us and accuse us when all we're doing is minding our own business. We aren't picketing in front of their centers. We aren't, crashing their meetings. We aren't, accosting people on the sidewalk as they try to get to their discussion meetings. None of that. We're just minding our own business over here on this quiet little backwater of Reddit. And they hate it. They just, it's very cult-like, very, very much. Just like with Christianity, they tell the membership that everybody wants this. Everybody's thirsty for what we have. What we have is so great. It's the most perfect thing for the people of this age. And so they gin everybody up to go try and sell at friends and relatives and neighbors and coworkers, whatever, because they'll want this guaranteed. And, there's a reason that people advise to never talk religion or politics when you're in a family gathering. So many people come to the SGI from difficult family backgrounds. There's estrangement, abuse, this sort of thing. And of course, SGI offers a perfect substitute family. That's why you should leave them your estate when you die. But in a family, they're also advised to chant to fix their families. And, when you have family ties that are already frayed, how much proselytizing and preaching are they going to be able to tolerate? How many times can you be invited to a discussion meeting that you have no wish whatsoever to go to before you're going to start distancing yourself from that person? Mm-hmm. So this is how SGI gets members to isolate themselves. They don't have to order them not to, to estrange from their families. They're doing it by trying to preach at their families. And their friends, well, when you don't have time to get together, and when you do get together, all you do is talk in this weird language about your weirdo religious beliefs, your friends are going to find better friends.
Yeah.
They just are. Yeah. And so that sort of thing actually works in the favor of these intolerant religions. It's the same with Christianity. Nobody wants to hear about Jesus. Come on. When they go out there and try to sell at somebody and get shut down, they come back and they tell, the rest of their district, I tried to shakabuku so-and-so, and she was really mean. And they'll say, oh, well, you know, that's just what people are like in this evil latter day of the law. They hate good things. They hate them for who knows why. It's just this time period. And yeah, they're so mean. Mean people suck, but we appreciate you. And, you know, you're still going to get the benefit from trying. And we really appreciate you. And, you know, you're just such a compassionate person that you try when people are so mean, you know, so it all serves to get the person tighter enmeshed in the cult, which makes it harder for them to leave, because when they leave, no one will have anything to do with them. Just like your Jehovah's Witnesses, they shun and who leaves. You know, they've been told that the worst thing they can ever do, it means you hate world peace. It means you hate people. You want to destroy the world. That's what it means when you leave. And who would want to be around people like that? Oh, they're just awful. So, you know, I spent just over 20 years in this cult. I don't have any friends older than about when I left, which is 2007, because I isolated. I didn't realize what was happening. I got caught up in it. People do that. And so I look at my friends. We have friends from college, friends from grade school, who are in touch with their relatives and family members. And this is all what I don't have because of the cult. And that is why it is so important to have a site that lays it on the line and makes it clear what they're doing and what it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you all your social capital. You will no longer have connections that will be able to get your kid an internship at a good company or clue you into who's a real good plumber who charges, you know, fair and does good work, or any of this, because you burn it all when you join a cult. And you end up impoverishing your life, even as they tell you how much fortune you're accumulating and how great it's going to be. Well, that day never comes. So I guess, you know, if you don't want to torch your life and destroy all your relationships, then by all means, join SGI. Or no, stay away from SGI, because you will, if you stick with it, you will end up interacting pretty much only with other SGI members. And they're terrible friends. They just aren't good friends because they're so self-centered.
I think one thing you touched on there is something that I spoke to with cult expert Janja Lalich on one of my recent episodes, where she spoke about the importance of keeping the door of communication open with somebody that might be involved in a cult or a sect or a high control movement, and I think that's kind of what you've just said here. You know, is you alienate yourself and isolate yourself from family members and friends by saying SGI, 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 and
right.
It must be, when you live and breathe that every single day, it must be difficult to talk or think about anything else, because you don't have anything else. And Janja was saying that it's so important to keep that line of communication open with that family member or friend who is being drawn into such a group. But how long can you physically and emotionally sustain that for before you just can't do it anymore?
Well, at what point do they become a stranger to you?
Yeah.
Of their own doing. And while you're in one of these high control groups that's so focused on getting new members all the time, is that becomes your focus as well. And whenever you meet someone new, you have this agenda playing in your mind. At what point can I introduce SGI? At what point can I suggest this person try chanting? So you're going in with this agenda, which means you aren't interacting honestly, or you're not interacting honestly, but you're also not interacting as a friend would. You're not presenting, you might be presenting yourself as a friend, but it's only for the purpose of manipulating this person into joining your group and that sort of thing. So it destroys your ability to make friends while you're in this group, because they'll be pressing you to bring your friends. Why have you told your friend about chanting? You know, maybe we should do a home visit to your friend together. type stuff. It's a real pressure cooker.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
so I lost 20 years of continuing relationships from before. But during that 20 years, I didn't make any new friends either, because I ended up isolated within the SGI. Everything was about SGI. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't.
Sounds like a very lonely experience.
It was.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got out, I didn't have anybody I could talk with it about, because, you say, I was in this cult, and they're like, ah! So that's another reason that we're so passionate about Sgi Whistleblowers, is because people can come there and tell us, and we're like, yeah, we know exactly what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for spending this time with me.
The level of commitment and work that you do for the subreddit, I think is highly commendable. You're obviously extremely knowledgeable, and I feel privileged that you've sat down here with me for a couple of hours and shared some of that wisdom and knowledge that you've gathered over the years. I think I just want to say a big thank you on behalf of the people whose lives you've clearly touched, that reached out to me and said, please will you talk to Blanche. And I know those people will be really excited to hear this episode, and you've really given me a different perspective on the movement. So thank you so much. I just really appreciate your time, and I look forward to continuing to be a member of the subreddit and keeping up with all the work you do. So thank you so much, Blanche, and I really hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
It was totally my honor. And yeah, we love your work, and we're just so glad that you kind of appeared on the subreddit, and that we can continue to kind of join forces to some degree.
Absolutely. I'm excited. And one day Sgi Crusader will show his face, and we can have a nice lengthy discussion about whether he's alive or not. And I really look forward to that day. So until then, Blanche, I will speak to you soon.
All right. Well, have a great year, and I hope you don't get shut down. And yay, bye-bye COVID with any luck.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you so much, Blanche, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, and I will see you online.
Bye-bye.
That is the end of this week's episode. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do so by emailing me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com, or find me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, and this has been the Cult Vault.